Mace here. On today's episode, I'm going to use up some of my old bananas and make some banana bread. And I'm going to make honey banana bread because I like using honey and it tastes good. So let us begin. This recipe is like many of my other ones in that it consists of different ingredients. To begin with, we need half a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup of butter, 3/4 cups of honey, 2 cups of flour, 2 eggs, and of course, a few bananas. To begin the process, we'll get our mixing bowl out and put our sifter on top. We'll start sifting some of our flour so we can get all the flour into the sifter, and then we can go over and grab our baking powder and toss it in, and sift it with the flour at the same time. Of course, don't forget our salt. I was supposed to put in the cinnamon at this point in time, but I forgot. So I'm just going to sift what I have here. And I'll remember later in like 10 minutes when I'm putting the liquids in. We'll toss out all that junk and then give it a quick little stir. Then we can move on to doing some more exciting things. Now we can move on to beating the eggs. Nothing screams excitement like a good egg beating. And then we can move on to our dry ingredients again and start adding our moist stuff. So we'll toss in our eggs, and then we'll toss in our honey, and then we can move on to doing our butter. Now while I was doing the honey, I had the butter in the microwave just to kind of soften it up. And of course there's the cinnamon that I forgot to put in. And now the vanilla, and then we can start mixing it up by hand. Now banana bread is not the easiest bread to make in the world. In fact, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. If you have really hard bread at the end, it's because you overmixed. I think a lot of people, they use electric mixers, they overmix the batter, and then they end up with hard bread. The other issue is the moisture content and getting a soggy bottom bread. Now the way to avoid that is to reduce the moisture in your mix or add more flour to compensate for excessive moisture. It's really hard to measure out the correct amount of bananas. I usually go by quantity rather than by volume. And the reason why I do that is because it's really hard to get the correct amount of, let's say you wanted a cup of mashed bananas. What are you going to do? You have to mash them all and then measure it out. So then you're left with a bunch of banana mush, which is completely useless unless you have a baby to feed it to. And it's kind of disgusting to eat on its own. So it's for that reason that I use all the bananas, and then I would compensate afterwards with additional flour if needed. And on my given recipe on this particular batch, I probably should have put in a little bit more flour than I did. And I'm going to adjust the recipe at the start. So instead of 2 cups, I'll use 2 1/4. And that should dry it out a little bit better. So I'm just going to peel these bananas and throw them in the bowl here. And then to mash them, I'm just going to use the old potato masher, and it works pretty good for doing this. If you ever have to make baby food with bananas, the potato masher is key. It does a fantastic job of mashing bananas, although I guess they're pretty soft. You could do it with a fork. It probably doesn't make a huge difference. Another thing about bananas is that, I guess fruit in general, is the closer it is to rotten, the better it is. So now we're just going to take our banana mixture and mix it in with our batter, and then we're going to give that a little bit of a mix. Now it was at this point that I was like, oh, this seems a little bit moist. This is a ridiculously wet batter. That was when I should have added a little bit more flour, but for whatever reason I wasn't trusting my instincts today, and that's usually a mistake. If you can't trust your instincts and you can't trust yourself, you're in trouble. So we'll just keep mixing that up till it's nice and pretty. And of course I'm talking like I came out with some terrible tasting banana bread that was just really funky, but it was really delicious, and it really wasn't that soggy on the bottom. It was just less than perfection, and that is just something that I just don't like. So we'll get our pan ready by putting some butter in it, and then we'll dump the whole mixture inside, and we'll get the spatula. We'll get the spatula out to clean out the bowl, and then we're good to throw it in the oven. And once we're all satisfied with that, we'll get her in the oven. Nice low temperature, either 325, 350. Cook it about an hour, check with a toothpick, see what you got afterwards. And then once it's done, like with your toothpick test, which we're going to look at right here, you stab it in, comes out clean. Wait a few minutes, and then take it out of the pan, and then slice it. Now if you slice it and you see it's really moist, you can always put it back in the pan, give it another 10 minutes, and you might be able to get rid of some sogginess. But don't like go to town and bake it twice as long, because if you do that, the thing might look pretty, but it will taste horrible. So it's kind of a bit of a trade-off between having it properly cooked and tasty and pretty. Either way, that's the end of this one. So let me know in the comments below how you make your banana bread. And if you like my content and would like to see more of it, please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay awesome.